Okay, here we are on our Pasto installation. Our CP1000 primer is cured out for about 4.5 hours now. We're ready to go on to the next step. If you're out on a large job, you might want to consider using spike shoes. If you use spike shoes, don't go with brand new spikes that are to a sharp point. You'll notice on these shoes what we've done is we've taken a grinder and we've doled out the spikes so it doesn't puncture through the primer. And that's just good practice for any application, including self-leveling. For today's demonstration, I'm going to keep our surface nice and clean by putting surgeon's booties on, just to keep the dust off of the surface of the concrete that we've worked so hard to profile. So we've mixed our Pasto. We're going to dump it onto the surface. And then the first tool that we're going to use is what's called a gauge rake. Okay? So I'm just going to get it out of the bucket. And then I'm going to use what we call a gauge rake. There's many different styles of gauge rakes. This happens to be one where we've adjusted it at the same height as our little walls or our forms that we've put on the sides here. Okay? Now understand, if I change the angle of this gauge rake like this, or I'll see a lot of applicators do this, that changes the grade or the elevation or the thickness of material that you're putting down. So make sure that you're putting it down uniformly. So I'm just going to get it right up into the corner here. Now I'm going to have my back to you for 1 second here, just to show you here. All right, go with our next buckets. The most important aspect at this phase is to get the material out there quickly. We can come back and refine it with finishing tools. Okay, you can see we've got those first 4 buckets down quickly. We're going to dump this one out and mix our next bucket up. Now what I want to try to do is keep a wet edge back and forth this way. I don't want to have a big line going out this way. In the event that it starts to dry, we want to keep a wet edge continuing this way with us. Just like we're going here. One other tip that we've done is we've taped the top of the foam here. We put tape so that when we start troweling, we don't want foam to dislodge and end up on our stamp overlay. All right, our gauge raking is complete. We've put 5 bags of the Pasto down here really quickly. Okay, so now the next step is to trowel it. Now here is where I see a lot of applicators make a common mistake. They almost treat this as if it's like ready mixed concrete, and they over trowel it. What happens is, if you over trowel it, you're going to really promote blistering. And what happens is you are sealing the moisture in, and the moisture wants to come up and escape, and because you've sealed it, almost like if you put a piece of plastic over it, there's nowhere for the moisture to go. So don't over trowel it. Now we're going to talk about 2 different coloring systems. So all we want to do is knock it flat, okay? We're just trying to screed out the gauge rake marks. Don't think of smooth finishing. Actually keeping it a little bit porous and coarse is better to prevent that blistering phenomena that I'm talking about. So remember, don't over trowel. So the first tool I'm going to show you that a lot of times guys will use is what we refer to as a funny trowel. Okay? The funny trowel is on a handle, and you can really reach out and do a very nice job like you see here. Now, one observation I want you to note is I'm going really slow, and I'm actually applying quite a bit of pressure. But the key is don't go quick. And then I pick it up, nice and slow. And then once again. So this is a great tool, and this is again referred to as a funny trowel. The next tool that we use is called the traditional hand trowel. Okay? Now I really like the hand trowel because I have a lot of control. Okay? I'm able to be right down on the material and apply specifically the right amount of pressure that I need. So you might ask, well, how do we get out in the middle of a slab? So what we'll do is we'll use what's called spiked knee boards. So I'll walk right out there. Walk right out on the surface. On these spiked knee boards, while one worker is applying it with a gauge rake, I can come right behind with relative ease and get the type of surface that we're looking for. Okay? That's it. That's all the troweling that we want. Okay? Now, I want you to notice the angle of my trowel as I'm troweling along. The angle is back in here. If I go too flat like this, it's going to just drag material. So the key to troweling these stamp overlays is slow, and notice the angle once again. And there's no reason to trowel that anymore, okay? For demonstration purposes, we do want to show you, though, coloring techniques. So I'll get this closed off one time, and then we'll just demonstrate on one corner some coloring tips. Now, it's a good idea to get in the routine, whatever your form is here, keep it nice and clean, because by the time that you come back and you stamp over the top of this, there's a good chance that this has already started to harden. And when you run the stamps over the edge of this and stamp it down, those chips could end up back in your overlay slab. Certainly there are plenty of options when it comes to coloring pasto. One option is using ChromaCast, which is what we refer to as a color hardener. Now the color hardener really originated with stamped concrete, okay? This is a cementitious dry powder with a blend of organic ingredients in here and wetting agents that is typically used on traditional concrete. However, if you use it sparingly, meaning you don't want to over apply this product on a stamp overlay, it is perfectly acceptable for coloring pasto or a stamp overlay. Also, a product that I'm particularly fond of is a product that's called ColorFast, which is a water wettable pigment. So in order for these materials to work, you have to have a sufficient supply of moisture. And if you look across the stamp overlay, the pasto, you can see a sheen to it, which is an indicator that it's going to allow these materials to wet out. You got to be careful on a dry, windy day, especially if it's warm outside. Be very careful about using these products. So you want to apply them in the cooler part of the day. Also, before applying these products, it's a good idea, before you take the bucket lid off, go ahead and turn it over and roll it, because what happens is it just from the packaging, and if it sits on a shelf, it consolidates the material. And when you reach in there, you don't want to throw this material in a big clump. So by turning the bucket over and rolling it, it loosens the material up. So you want to have a nice fluffy material. So we're only going to apply a little bit just for demonstration purposes, and then ultimately our goal is to use both pattern stamping and also seamless texture skins on our pasto application. So like I said, safety is important. We want to go ahead and protect ourselves, and also wear your dust mask for protection prior to applying these applications here. So when you apply it, what you need to do is, as I said, fluff it up. And I'm going to just, for demonstration purpose, go real slow. I always want to throw below my knee and just a light broadcast. So I'm not throwing from up this way. It's always a nice, very light broadcast, just for some color contrast. And that's about it. You really don't need much more. We'll put some color fast in there, once again for demonstration purposes, to show you some of the effects that you're able to get when using these products. Okay, that's about the extent. So now what we're going to do is we're going to allow that to set on the surface. In conditions like we have today, it's very controlled, probably for a good 3 to 5 minutes, to allow it to absorb. Don't just work it right away because it hasn't absorbed the moisture from our pasto. So go ahead and let it sit there for, like I said, 3 to 5 minutes. And then we're going to hit it one time with the trowel and no more troweling. I can't stress the importance of over troweling. If you over trowel, you're going to be really prone to having the material blister. We've waited 3 minutes roughly since the time we applied our color hardener and our color fast coloring pigment. Now let's see what we get, and we're going to just lightly work it in, trying to stress not to overwork the material. Okay? And it's working in really nice. We've got a good sufficient amount of moisture that's allowing us to work this material in. Then what we'll do when we get to the edges, we will come through and work the edges by hand with our hand trowel. Once we get the material to that stage right there, we probably in these conditions will not touch this for another 2 hours, roughly 2 hours, before we come back and demonstrate our both pattern stamping and also our seamless texturing skins. So just get that color worked in. I also want you to notice on my trowel strokes, I'm trying to use what I refer to as an organic trowel pattern. So I'm trying to avoid the big stroke. So I may come this way and then cross back over. What I'm trying to avoid is these big rainbow or half arc trowel strokes. It's just a good routine to get into when you're working with these cement-based toppings. Okay? Remember, our goal is not to get it ultra smooth here. It's just to blend and manipulate the color and then get off of it. We do not want to overwork the material.